The sun was dying on 442b, not the actual star. That would take millions of years. But for Captain and the 4,000 people under his command, hope was disappearing like light at the end of a long tunnel. The human colony sat inside a network of caves, reinforced with metal sheets salvaged from their crashed transport ship. 3 years. 3 years since the jump drive failed and threw them into this hostile world. 3 years of watching people die to alien bullets and starvation. Stood on the observation platform, looking out at the red landscape beyond the colony walls. They had attacked 4 times this week alone. They came in groups of 30 or 40, running across the open ground with weapons that burned through steel like it was paper. The colony's defenses held, but each attack took more ammunition, more lives, more hope. His daughter Emma found him there as the afternoon light turned orange. She was 19 now, tall like her mother had been, with the same sharp eyes that never missed details. She carried a data pad, and her face told him the news was not good. "The power core is failing faster," she said without greeting. "No point wasting words. We have maybe 3 weeks before it shuts down completely." Closed his eyes. The power core kept the weapons charged, the lights running, and the communication systems alive. Without it, they were finished. The colony would go dark, and they would simply walk through their defenses. "How much longer until the food supplies run out?" he asked. 5 weeks, maybe 6 if we cut rations again." Emma paused. "Father, people are already hungry, the children are weak, another cut will cause problems." Knew she was right. He had watched the faces change over the past year. The soldiers still had the strength to fight, but the children and elderly were becoming shadows. Starvation would take them long before they did. In the lower levels of the cave, Sarah Mitchell worked in the engineering chamber. She was 23, brilliant, and currently staring at a problem that seemed impossible. The power core had been damaged in the crash and jury-rigged by previous engineers. It was a miracle it had worked at all for 3 years. Now it was dying, and no replacement existed on this planet. But Sarah's mind worked differently than most. While others saw death coming, she saw possibilities. She had been studying the core for weeks, and an idea had formed. It was crazy. It would never work, but it was the only chance they had. She pulled up her calculations on the terminal and studied them again. If she could redirect the power core's output instead of trying to repair it, she could create something new, something small, something that might work as a communication beacon, a desperate signal to Earth. The signal would take 14 months to arrive. Even if someone heard it, even if Earth sent a response immediately, help would take at least 2 years. The colony could not survive 2 more years, but it was something. It was hope. Sarah packed her tools and made her way to the command center. Captain was there with his council, arguing about tactics. They always argued, wanted to send scouts out to learn more about the positions. The supply officer wanted to focus on food production. The medical chief wanted to move the sick into separate chambers. "I need to speak with you," Sarah said too. The room went quiet. Led her into his private office, a small carved space in the rock with a single light hanging from the ceiling. Sarah explained her plan. She spoke quickly, laying out the mathematics and the theory. She explained what could go wrong, which was almost everything. But she also explained what could go right. "It might work," said when she finished. "It might," Sarah agreed. "But I will need 3 weeks to rebuild the core. During that time, our weapons systems will be running on battery power only. If the attack during that window, we will lose people we cannot afford to lose." Thought about the equation. 3 weeks of danger to create a small chance of rescue, or let the colony die slowly with no chance at all. "Do it," he said. The next day called a meeting of all colony leaders. He explained the situation clearly. The food would not last. The power was failing. But there was one option, a communication beacon that might reach Earth. It was unlikely to work. Help might not come, but they had to try. Then made the hardest decision of his life. He announced that he would take the last fighter shuttle, the one piece of military equipment that still functioned, and scout the positions personally. He would gather information about their forces, their numbers, their supply lines, intelligence that might help Earth if help ever came. "You will stay here," he told Emma. "You will monitor the beacon. You will keep people alive." Emma wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in her father's eyes. This was not how the signal arrived at Earth Station 1 on a quiet Tuesday morning. The communications officer, a man named Foster, was drinking coffee when the alarm went off. He had been working the deep space receiver station for 8 years and had never heard that particular alarm before. His hands moved without thinking, pulling up the data stream that was flooding into the system. It was from 442B, a human colony, a distress signal 3 years late. His hands shook as he sent the message up the command chain. Within 30 minutes, the entire Sol Defense Command was mobilized. The Colonial Affairs Office confirmed it. The colony was real. They were alive. They needed help. Admiral Brooks received the news while she was reviewing quarterly reports in her office. She was 56 years old, had served in the military for 34 years, and had never sent a fleet to save colonists because no colony had ever been truly lost before. The information came to her in fragments: a colony under attack, an alien species called and a desperate signal that had taken 14 months to cross space. Read through everything twice. Then she made her first decision. She called an emergency meeting of the War Council. The council assembled in the strategy room deep beneath Earth's surface. 20 officers, scientists, and government representatives sat around a long table, laid out the facts without decoration. There was a human colony under attack. The attackers appeared to be an advanced alien civilization. Earth had two choices: send help or send nothing. "If we send a fleet, we commit significant resources," said General Robert Hayes, who controlled the military budget. "We do not know if these colonists can survive long enough for a fleet to reach them. If we do not send a fleet, we tell every human in deep space that Earth will abandon them when things become difficult," replied. "We tell that we are weak, that we will not fight. Is that the message we want to send?" The room went silent. "How long would a fleet take to reach 442B?" asked Doctor, the chief scientist. "Using current jump gate technology, approximately 2 years," answered. "The colony reports they can survive perhaps 6 months. The situation is critical." "Then they are already lost," Robert said simply. Had prepared for this response. She handed each council member a folder marked classified. Inside was information about the new experimental technology that had been in development for 3 years. The super jump gates, the ones that could cut travel time to a fraction of what normal gates could achieve. "These gates are not tested," Robert said, scanning the documents. "They are theory." "They are more than theory," said quietly. She had been studying the folder with growing excitement. "The mathematics work, the simulations work. We have never built one at full scale, but the design is sound." "You are suggesting we deploy unproven technology to save a colony that may already be dead," Robert said. "I am suggesting we do what humans do," replied. "We try, we adapt, we risk ourselves to save our own people. That is who we are." The discussion continued for 4 hours. Finally, a vote was called. The decision was unanimous. A fleet would be prepared. The experimental jump gates would be built. They would send help to 442B. In the weeks that followed, Earth changed in ways that had not happened since the old wars of the 20th century. Governments unified their military commands. Scientists worked around the clock on the jump gate project. Shipyards began building vessels at speeds that should have been impossible. Soldiers and pilots reported for duty knowing they might never return. The first experimental jump gate was completed in 6 months. It was massive, a structure larger than any military installation on Earth. 3 billion tons of metal and machinery, powered by a reactor the size of a city. Scientists held their breath as it was activated for the first time. It worked. The second gate was completed 2 weeks later. The entire fleet was assembled. 15 capital ships, 32 destroyers, 100 escort fighters, and 50 transport vessels filled with supplies, weapons, and replacement soldiers. It was the largest deployment of military force in human history. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of the command ship USS Atlanta as her officers prepared for departure. The ship was massive, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could level cities. She had handpicked her command staff from the finest officers in Earth's military. They knew they were flying into unknown space, against an unknown enemy, with technology that had never been used in combat. Watched her officers work, moving with the precision of people who had trained for exactly this moment. She thought about the colony on 442B. 4,000 people who had been waiting for 3 years, hoping that someone would remember them. Someone would come. Someone would fight. "Begin the sequence," ordered. The jump gates powered up, and the entire fleet moved into position. The air around them began to shimmer and bend. felt the weight of millions of tons of warship around her, carrying humanity's greatest hope and fiercest determination into the darkness. "Gate opening in 30 seconds, a technician announced. Stood tall and spoke clearly into the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. We are about to travel to a place where humans are alone and under attack. We are going to remind them that they are not alone anymore. We are going to remind the galaxy what it meant." Emma stood over a wounded soldier and watched the blood drain from his face. His name was David, and he had been shot in the abdomen during the morning attack. Victor Hayes, the colony's chief doctor, worked quickly with instruments that were too old and hands that were too tired. The medicine they had was running out. In another week, they would have nothing left to kill pain or prevent infection. "He will live," Victor said, but his voice carried no conviction. "For now." David died 3 hours later. The infection was too strong, the fever too high, the medicine too weak. Emma helped carry his body to the storage chamber where they kept the dead until they could be buried in the rock outside the walls. 23 people had died in the past month. 23 people she knew by name. The colony was breaking. Emma could see it in the eyes of everyone around her. The soldiers still moved with discipline, but they moved slower now. The children were thin, their ribs showing through their clothes. The adults had stopped talking about rescue and started talking about how long they could hold on. Sarah Mitchell came to Emma with grim news. The beacon had been broadcasting for 9 weeks without response. No signal from Earth, no indication that anyone had heard them. "It was always a long chance," Sarah said, but she was trying to convince herself as much as Emma. "The signal only travels as fast as light. Earth is 14 light-months away." "Maybe the signal did not make it," Emma said. She was not trying to be cruel, she was trying to be realistic. "Maybe no one will ever know we are here." Sarah had no answer to that. The attacks continued, but they changed in nature. Instead of massive assaults, they became probing strikes. Small groups would test the colony's defenses at different points, learning the patterns, learning the weak places. They were intelligent. They had advanced weapons and better armor. They had starships that could destroy the entire colony with a single orbital strike if they wanted to. But they were being careful. They were being strategic. Emma realized what was happening. They were not trying to destroy the colony quickly. They were wearing them down. They were waiting for humanity to break itself through starvation and exhaustion. One night, Emma sat with her father's old command logs. Had not returned in 8 weeks. She had to assume he was dead. The last fighter shuttle would have run out of fuel by now. Either he had found shelter or they had shot him down. She preferred to think he had found shelter, perhaps hidden in some cave system far from the colony. At least that way he was not suffering. She read through his personal notes and found an entry that made her pause. Had written about the moment when a commander realizes that they cannot save everyone, that no matter how hard they fight, people will die. The only choice is how to face that reality, with panic or with courage. Emma made a decision that night. She went to Victor and told him she was taking over the supply distribution herself. She cut the rations even further for herself and the other leaders, but she protected the children and the elderly. If the colony was going to die, it would not die with Emma abandoning them. She walked the caves every day, speaking to people, listening to their fears, telling them stories about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans, about cities full of millions of people, about the fact that humanity had survived worse things than this. She could not promise them rescue, but she could promise them that they would not die alone. Victor worked without sleeping. He performed surgeries by candlelight when the power failed. He used old-fashioned antiseptics when modern medicine ran out. He held people's hands when they were dying and told them their names would be remembered. He was only 31 years old, but his face looked like he had lived 100 years. The children organized themselves into work groups. Young people who could not fight could still carry water, process food, repair equipment. One girl, named Lisa, who was only 12 years old, took charge of the youngest children and kept them calm during the attacks. She would sing to them, tell them stories, help them forget that the walls were being shaken by alien weapons. 8 weeks after suddenly, their ground forces pulled back to defensive positions. Their attack shuttles stopped coming. The constant pressure that had been crushing the colony for months disappeared like someone had simply turned off a switch. Emma called an emergency council. Everyone had the same question: what did this mean? "Either they are preparing for a major assault," suggested Colonel Anderson, who led the military forces, or they have received new orders from their command structure. There is something else happening, Sarah said quietly. I picked up unusual energy signatures in the upper atmosphere. Something is coming, something big. Emma looked out at the night sky through the observation port. For 3 years, the sky had the battle in space was unlike anything they had ever experienced. They had fought other species. They had conquered worlds. But they had never fought humans, and humanity was not fighting the way they expected. Admiral Brooks did not attack the fleet head-on. She did not try to match their strength with strength. Instead, she used something the aliens did not understand: creative chaos. The human fighters moved in patterns that made no sense according to tactical doctrine. They approached from angles that should have left them vulnerable. They broke formation when formation would have protected them. They acted as if they had nothing to lose because, in a way, they did not. 4,000 colonists on a hostile planet represented a debt that had to be paid. The first capital ship exploded in a spray of burning metal. Then another. The human weapons were not more powerful than weapons, but they were being used in ways the aliens could not predict. Human pilots were making split-second decisions based on intuition and experience rather than following calculated protocols. They could not anticipate moves that were not logical. Watch the battle from the bridge of the USS Atlanta. Her tactical officers called out coordinates and damage reports with the precision of people who had trained for this exact moment. Fighters launched in waves. Destroyers moved with balletic grace despite their massive size. Capital ships positioned themselves to provide cover for smaller vessels in ways that surprised and overwhelmed the defense network. Target the command ship, ordered. She had identified the fleet commander's vessel by analyzing their communication patterns. Focus all available firepower on that location. The human fleet turned like a school of fish, all moving in the same direction at the same time. 32 destroyers opened fire simultaneously. The command ship's shields could not withstand the barrage. Neither could the ship itself. It broke apart in a cascade of explosions that lit up the darkness of space. The fleet hesitated. For 3 seconds they had no commander. For 3 seconds they did not know what to do. It was not enough time to win, but it was enough time to break their coordination. On the planet's surface, the forces realized that the sky was now hostile. The ships that had provided air support were being destroyed. The reinforcements that should have been arriving were not coming. The ground forces were alone, and above them, a new power was establishing itself in the sky. The commanders made a critical decision. They would launch everything they had at the colony in one massive assault. They would destroy it before the human fleet could land reinforcements. It was desperate. It was their only chance. Inside the colony, the sensors detected the ground forces mobilizing. Thousands of them, more than the colony had ever seen before, more than they could possibly fight. Emma stood in the command center and looked at Colonel Anderson. "This is it," she said simply. "We cannot stop them," Anderson replied. "We do not have enough ammunition. We do not have enough people." "Then we buy time," Emma said. "We hold them back long enough for the ships in the sky to do their job." Emma opened communications to all colony personnel. "This is Emma. All military personnel report to defensive positions. This is not a drill. The final assault is beginning. We fight. We hold. We survive." Victor Hayes heard the announcement in the medical chamber. He looked at the wounded soldiers around him, the sick children, the people who could not fight. He made the hardest decision of his life. He took up a rifle, left instructions for the medical staff to protect the vulnerable, and walked toward the cave entrance. "You do not have to do this," a nurse said to him as he passed. "Neither do you," Victor replied, "but someone has to." He joined the line of soldiers forming at the colony walls. Sarah Mitchell was not a soldier, but she was an engineer. She understood systems and structures and weapons. She also understood that the colony's defensive turrets had been jury-rigged from salvaged equipment and were not functioning at full capacity. She climbed to the upper turret platform and began making adjustments, rewiring circuits, optimizing power distribution, increasing firing rates beyond what should have been possible. When the first wave of soldiers came across the red landscape, the colony's defenses were ready. Weapons that had seemed weak suddenly became devastating. They charged forward, expecting to overwhelm the humans through superior force and superior individual combat ability. But they had not expected humans who would fight even when victory was impossible. Colonel Anderson watched the enemy approach and made tactical decisions that kept the colony alive one more minute, then another minute, then another. He positioned soldiers to create crossfire zones. He called retreat commands that allowed wounded soldiers to be replaced by fresh. The colony was transformed overnight. Medical teams from Earth's fleet moved through the caves with medicine and equipment that seemed like magic to people who had been using salvaged tools for 3 years. Food arrived, real food, not rationed protein bars and recycled nutrients. Fresh water, clean clothes, bandages that worked, antibiotics that killed infections. The people of 442B felt like they were waking from a nightmare. Admiral Brooks landed at the colony entrance 2 days after the battle ended. She had left command of the fleet to her second officer and came down personally to see the colony she had sacrificed so much to save. Emma was waiting for her at the airlock. They did not embrace. They were professionals and there was work to be done, but placed her hand on Emma's shoulder and spoke quietly. "Your father did not return with our forces," said. "It was not a question." "He may still be alive somewhere," Emma replied. "Hiding in the rock, waiting for rescue, or he may be gone, we do not know for certain." Nodded slowly. "We will search every cave and every ravine on this planet until we find him or find proof of his fate. He did not sacrifice himself just to be abandoned." The search teams were organized immediately. Military personnel spread out across the landscape with thermal sensors and ground-penetrating radar. They searched for 3 days. They found on the 4th day, alive but barely conscious, sheltering in a cave system 15 kilometers from the colony. He had been surviving on insects and water for 8 weeks, waiting and hoping that someone would find him. When the rescue team carried him back to the colony, Emma ran to him and held him like he might disappear again. Was thin and burned by the harsh sun, but he was alive. Victor Hayes supervised his medical care, making sure that received the best treatment available. Within a week was walking again. Within 2 weeks he was walking with Brooks, planning the colony's future. Sarah Mitchell was offered a position in Earth's space engineering program. They wanted her to work at one of the research stations orbiting Earth. They told her that her talent was too valuable to leave isolated on a frontier colony. Sarah listened to their offer and then declined. "This is my colony," she said simply. "I crashed here, I stayed here, I helped build the beacon that saved us. I am not leaving." Instead, she was promoted to chief engineer for the colony and given command of the construction teams that Earth was sending to build permanent defensive installations and expand the settlement. Victor asked for permission to stay as well. He had trained in the most desperate circumstances possible. He had learned to save lives with almost nothing. Now he had equipment and medicine and the possibility to truly help people. He opened a new medical center, larger and better equipped than anything the colony had before. He trained new doctors from among the colonists, teaching them everything he had learned about survival medicine. Young Lisa, the 12-year-old girl who had kept the other children calm during the attacks, was given a role helping younger evacuees settle into the colony. She showed them the cave systems and taught them survival skills. She understood what it meant to be afraid, and she had the confidence of someone who had lived through the worst and survived. The other children followed her like she was a leader, and indeed, she had become one. Emma was promoted to colony administrator. Brooks asked her to lead the colony's civilian government. It was a massive responsibility for a 19-year-old, but had watched Emma lead people through desperation. If anyone could lead them through recovery, it was her. Took command of the colony's defense forces. Earth left behind a garrison of 500 soldiers and modern weapons. They had been the major threat, but wanted to make sure that no other hostile force would ever be able to threaten 442B again. Worked with the garrison commander to build a defensive network that made the colony into a fortress. On the first night of peace, people gathered on the highest observation platform. It was the same place Emma had stood many times, looking at the empty sky and wondering if rescue would ever come. Now the sky was full of human ships, cargo vessels unloading supplies, passenger ships bringing colonists and settlers, construction ships preparing to expand the colony. The USS Atlanta hung in orbit like a guardian, its lights blazing in the darkness. Found Emma on the observation platform. They stood side by side watching the stars. "We lost 23 soldiers," Emma said. 23 people who will never see Earth again." "Yes," replied, "and 4,000 people who will, 4,000 people who lived because we did not give up. That is not failure, that is survival." They stood in silence, and then Emma asked the question that had been haunting her for weeks. Were you really surviving in a cave, or were you captured? Turned to look at his daughter. I was captured, they held me for 4 weeks, then I escaped. Then I survived in a cave. It was hard, Emma. I wanted to give up many times, but I thought about you. I thought about the colony. I thought about the fact that someone had to believe that rescue would come, so I believed. Emma held her father again, and this time they both let the tears come. They had survived. They had endured. They had stood together through the darkness, and now they had emerged into the light. Below them, the colony expanded. Humans worked beside machines, building new structures, clearing new caves, establishing new farms. The dream of 442B was being reborn, not as a desperate outpost on an alien world, but as a real colony, a real home, a place where humanity had planted its flag and refused to be removed. Sarah looked at her beacon device one last time and powered it down. It had done its job. Earth had heard them. Earth had come. The beacon was no longer needed. But the message it had sent would echo across the galaxy. Humans did not abandon their own. When humans were attacked, humans responded with overwhelming force. When humans were threatened, humans fought back. When humans were in danger, other humans would sacrifice everything to help them. 3 years later, 442B had grown to a settlement of 15,000 people. New ships arrived every month. New families established homes in the caves. New children were born in the colony medical center. The threat from them was completely gone. Their empire in this sector had been destroyed, and they had never sent another force to challenge human control of the planet. Stood with his daughter on the observation platform again. Now Emma was no longer the desperate teenager struggling to keep people alive. She was a confident administrator, overseeing a thriving community. "Do you ever regret staying?" asked his daughter. "Never," Emma replied. "This is where I learned who I am. This is where I learned what it means to lead. This is where I learned that humans are stronger than we know." They looked out at the colony, at the lights in the caves, at the construction sites, at the ships in orbit, at the red landscape that was no longer a prison but a home. Somewhere across the galaxy, other colonies on hostile worlds were sending out their own distress signals, and Earth was listening. Earth had learned the lesson of 442B. Never again would any human settlement be abandoned. Never again would any human face the darkness alone. The age of isolated human colonies had ended. The age of unified humanity had begun. And it had all started on 442B, where 4,000 people had stood alone until Earth sent a fleet that shattered worlds. Fighters, he did the mathematics of survival in real time, sacrificing one position to strengthen another. The ground shook from explosions above as the space battle raged. They were being pushed back, losing ship after ship. But on the ground, they still had overwhelming numbers. The colony's ammunition was running low again. People were being wounded faster than Victor could treat them. Then a sound cut through the chaos, the sound of a human engine. The first fighter shuttle from the human fleet was descending toward the colony, weapons hot and ready. It was not, but it did not matter. Reinforcements had arrived. The human pilot unleashed a fury of fire on the ground forces. Other shuttles descended behind the first. Human soldiers poured out, fresh and heavily armed. The tide of battle turned immediately. They realized they were beaten. They fell back, their assault broken, their army destroyed. They retreated to their remaining ships. They tried to escape into space. But the human fleet was waiting for them. There was no escape. There was only the choice between surrender and annihilation. They chose to fight to the end. One by one, their ships were destroyed. Their empire in this sector was ended, its military forces completely eliminated. The humans had come to 442B as liberators, and they had fought like demons to earn that title. As the last vessel exploded in space, the colony fell silent. People realized they were still alive. The impossible had happened. Help had come. They had survived. Been empty except for the ships. Now something was changing. The air felt different. Even the red landscape seemed to hold its breath. "Gather everyone in the central chamber," Emma commanded. "Prepare for evacuation protocols. I want the elderly and children ready to move deeper into the caves if we need to. Soldiers, I want all weapons charged and ready. Medical personnel, get the injured stabilized so they can be moved if necessary." The colony moved into action with the efficiency of people who had practiced survival for 3 long years. They did not know what was coming. but they were ready for anything. As the night deepened, more energy signatures appeared in the atmosphere. Massive ones, ones that dwarfed anything they had brought. The sensors that Sarah had jury-rigged from salvaged equipment began to scream warnings. Multiple objects entering the system, Sarah called out. Multiple massive objects, the power signatures are, they are not. Emma's heart began to race. She had stopped believing in rescue weeks ago. But now, in this moment with impossible readings flooding the sensors, she allowed herself to think one forbidden thought. They were not alone anymore. The sky erupted with light as weapons systems came online. The darkness before the storm was ending. The real fight was beginning. To threaten human beings, for Earth, for our people, for the colony. The gates flared with light and 15 capital ships vanished. 32 destroyers followed. 100 fighters jumped through. And finally, the transports carrying supplies, medicine, and hope disappeared into the space between stars. On Earth, people watched the monitors and knew that their species had taken a stand. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. No more abandoned colonies, no more isolated people left to die in the darkness. Earth had awakened, and it was ready to fight. Discussion had made his choice. Over the next week, the colony transformed. Sarah worked in the engineering chamber with 2 assistants, carefully dismantling the power core. The soldiers prepared supplies for mission. The people understood that this was their moment, the moment when everything changed or everything ended. On the morning was ready to leave, he stood with Emma one last time. He held her shoulders, looked into her eyes, and spoke words that were both simple and enormous. No matter what happens, you keep people alive. You keep them together. You are stronger than you know. Emma hugged her father, feeling like a child again, though she knew she would have to be an adult from this moment forward. Flew out into the red landscape, the shuttle's engine cutting through the thin atmosphere. Behind him, the colony walls disappeared into the dust. In the engineering chamber, Sarah made the final connection that sent the first beacon signal racing towards space. And across the vast darkness of the stars, unknown to anyone on 442b, the signal began its long journey home to Earth.